based in Norway, and today I'm going to talk about optimal routing under EU emission trading system. I said to Stefan before this event that I think we're not there to talk about optimal routing yet when it comes to EU ETS. It's a lot of steps before that, but I'll take you through our take on this from a Wilhelmsen perspective. And it's a discussion, so if you have questions along the way, please fire and we'll try to answer as good as possible. And also I will share the presentation, I think I can say that. So if you want it, that's no problem. I was thinking that I could first and foremost give a general introduction to EU ETS, what the concept is all about, and also the regulations from a shipping point of view. Then we will talk a little bit about how we interpret this as a ship manager. We have a lot of discussions with customers, ship owners, and then I can tell you a little bit about what we see they are focusing on. And how we have sort of approached this as a ship manager towards our customers, who's the ship owner. And then at the end, future steps to optimize a route under EU ETS. So that's the plan. So what is, and yeah, just before I start, you will see two different logos. You will see one Wilhelmsen logo and one Hecla emissions management logo. You get the story at the end of the end of the session. But EU ETS is the European emissions trading system, and it's the most sophisticated and liquid carbon market in the world. I think it trades around 2 billion euros per day, so it's highly active market. It actually already covers 40% of the industries in Europe today. It was established in 2005 as a cap and trade system, basically meaning that EU has put a ceiling on the accepted level of CO2 or greenhouse gas emissions, and then said that, okay, to emit, you need to buy EUAs, which is equal to the cap. And the idea is that the cap will reduce over time, pushing the cost of carbon up. The EUAs, or European Union allowance, that's the currency in this system. It's basically a digital token. And this, to me, is also one thing that makes it quite administrative and challenging to manage as a shipping industry. If you have one EUA, you can emit 1 ton of CO2 in Europe. So that's basically the idea, that you can buy EUA and then you're allowed to emit 1 ton of CO2. The EUAs are stored in registry accounts, which is hosted by the nations in Europe. So for instance, in Norway, we have the environmental agency. They are the provider of the registry accounts. And this is basically like a warehouse or an online bank that you need to have to be able to receive and send EUAs. If you're not complying with ETS regulations and you're failing on surrendering the requested amount of EUAs, you're in for a penalty of 100 euros per ton of CO2 on top of the actual EUA you were supposed to hand in to the governments. And EU, I think from a pricing perspective, EU are not interested in the carbon price going too high, neither too low, so they also control the supply side of the carbon price. But I think all in all, this system has been in place soon 20 years. It's a war in Europe at the moment, and they're still keeping this system, so this is here to stay in our opinion. And when you look at the price as well, yesterday when I checked, it was around 80 euros per EUA. It has increased significantly over the last 3 years. But as you also see, the price is very volatile. So when Russia invaded Ukraine, the price dropped 30 euros overnight. And last year, from mid-August to September, the price also dropped 30 euros. So timing the market is critical for many people here to minimize the cost of carbon, basically. Is that clear? As I said, just ask questions along the way, and I'll try to answer. Then it's ETS for shipping. Last year, in December, I think EU finally decided that, okay, let's go ahead and implement this for the shipping industry as well. As I said on the previous slide, this is a generic regulation for land-based industries, primarily in Europe. You also have some on the aviation side. But now you're introducing shipping. And shipping, you have moving targets. You have a lot of stakeholders in the value chain. You have ship managers, you have ship owners, you have charterers, you have cargo owners. And you have sort of an industry dynamic which is quite different from a power plant in Poland, basically. And that complicates things. But it's, EU have tried to sort of set up a framework that we need to follow. It starts, the implementation of the regulation is 1st of January 2024. It's going to be a gradual phase-in, meaning that in 2024, it's going to be 40% phased in. In 25, it's going to be 70% phased in. And then 100% in 2026 and onwards, basically. So that means that you next year have to only pay for 40% of the ETS applicable emissions. And who's responsible here? I think the jury is still out on who's responsible for compliance and surrendering the EUAs. But as we see it, the shipping company is defined as either the owner or the entity controlling the ISM. It's responsible for the ship under the ISM code, and they are the ones who's going to surrender the EUAs. EU is still discussing this, and we expect it to be, the discussions to be finalized in October. But we think the dock holder basically is going to be the one who's responsible for surrendering. Then it's sort of, okay, what emissions should be covered by EU ETS in shipping? Obviously, it's voyages intra-EU from port to port, and also emissions in port, 100% of those. But EU has actually pulled it a little bit further with saying that, okay, all inbound and outbound voyages is going to be under EU ETS as well. So that means if you're traveling from Houston to Gdansk, in this example, you have to pay for half of the leg or voyage, basically, from middle of the Atlantic Ocean and towards Europe. So that actually makes the cost higher, significantly higher. But it's also an invitation, I think, from EU to say that in that example, US invite them to implement something similar and take the other 50% and add the cost of carbon, basically, to it.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Voyage is defined by last port of call?
Yeah, port to port.
Outside the European Union?
Yeah.
Because if I go from Houston to, I don't know, Tanjamet, and then I go back to Gdansk, then it would only be accounted for Tanjamet to Gdansk. Is that correct?
Yeah, correct. So port to port. Yeah. Carbon is covered as of now, or CO2, but in the future we will also have methane and nitrous oxide from 2026 and onwards. And here you also see that the MRV and ETS cycle. The ETS settlement is going to be based on the MRV numbers, and the MRV cycle is sort of you emit throughout the year, and then at the end of the year you sort of calculate the total number of emissions that you've had. That's reported to the EU by end of March, And then on 30th of September, by then you should have surrendered the EUAs to Europe. And in between here, it's a lot of stuff that you need to have sorted out that is specific for the shipping industry especially. We have talked to aviation as an example, and the aviation industry, and they don't see the same complexity on their end because the DOC actually follows, or the DOC, it follows the airplanes, so the ones operating it is the one who's responsible for buying and surrendering EUAs. It's natural to compare shipping and aviation, but in this case it's different. This picture here scared us. This was presented in October 2021, and it basically showcases the daily EUA cost for ships sailing intra-EU, non-eco vessels, assuming 100% phased-in scenario. So this is a 2026 scenario, and the EUA price is around 90 euros per ton. And as you see, for VLCCs, it's pushing $20,000 per day. Capesize is $14,000 per day. We've seen EUA prices at close to 100 euros per ton. And then this was the December last year, then the cost of emission, the carbon cost, was actually higher than the daily TC rates. And that's serious to us. We are ship managers from a lean industry. We are used to sort of focusing on cost, but this is just knocking the cost out of the ballpark, basically. We have had discussions with some tanker owners, and they were considering early retirement when they saw this picture. So it's, for us, this is serious, and this is also why we, as a company, started focusing on ETS. And then I've stolen a slide. No, sorry. I've stolen a slide from DNV. I'll show you later, but just a little bit about us as a company, Wilhelmsen Ship Management. Many people think that we are sort of an in-house ship manager, but we are actually a third-party ship manager, and that means that we also have a lot of other clients outside of the Wilhelmsen group. We have about 60 clients. We have 260 ships under technical management. We're represented in basically all large shipping segments. We also have provide sort of seafarers to our clients. So we have around 11,000 seafarers, 600 shore personnel, and manning centers and technical centers around the world. And we also have a couple of joint ventures on the technical side. The biggest actually here in Hamburg, which is Wilhelmsen Kiel, who's focusing primarily on the container market. But the point with this slide is to show that we see a lot of different shipping companies, and we see what's sort of moving out there as well. This is the slide that I've been inspired by DNV, and I've stolen it a little bit, so sorry about that, DNV, but it's not necessarily the DNV content, but it's adjusted slightly and also simplified a little bit. But this is how we see that the EU ETS is going to be settled in a way between different parties. But this is, of course, subject to regulatory changes and also, I think, industry best practices that can adjust this. But this is a take on how it can be solved, basically. If we start with the legal agreements, we see that the ship manager has to make the owner responsible for collecting and buying EUAs. It doesn't mean that the owner has to pay for them, but they have to be the entity that sort of makes sure that the sufficient amount of EUAs is in place. The owner needs to make the ship manager responsible for sending emissions data to the owner, and the owner is the one who owns that data. Then the owner has to turn around to the charter and agree the terms on how the EUAs should be settled. Should the charter send EUAs? Should he send cash? What database or what data should be the foundation for the settlement? And also, how frequent should the settlement happen? Should it be on a voyage per voyage basis? Should it be on a monthly basis? Etc. Then there's a lot of actions that has to take place as well. So the ship manager has to share the emissions to the owner. Then the owner has to create a report and send it to the charter. That's sort of the basis for the settlement as well. The owner have to go, no, the charter have to go out and buy the EUAs in the market and then transfer them back to the ship owner. The ship owner potentially have to go out in the market and buy EUAs himself, because it's not necessarily that he has chartered out his vessel all the time, so he might be actually on the hook for some EUAs as well. Then he has to transfer the EUAs to the ship manager, who at the end have to surrender it by 30th of September the year after to the authorities in the EU. So this is how we envision that this can be solved. But this is a simplified version of the reality, I would say. Then the challenges for ship owners that we meet, and also the ongoing discussions related to EU ETS. This is not an exhaustive list, but I've divided it in two. One administrative list and one commercial list. I will start with the administrative list. The first hurdle we see for ship owners is that they need to be able to set up these registry accounts with the European Union and the nations that's hosting this. This is quite a long process itself. In Norway, it can take up to 6 months, unfortunately. We see Denmark is quite efficient on this, but each nation have their own requirements and systems in place in terms of it. It's more or less the same, but there are tweaks. The companies also have to set up account representatives, and all of this to be ready to basically receive EUAs or send EUAs by Q1 2024. That's the first part. And then it's the data quality element. We see, as I said, it's the MRV data that's being used as a basis. Previously, the MRV regime was on an annual basis. You collected the data throughout the year. It was verified by the class society and then sent to EU with no consequences, actually. Now you need to have bankable data, basically, because you're going to transact on the data that's being reported. So you want it to be as accurate and correct as possible. And that also is relevant in terms of the charter who's potentially going to pay for the emission as well. So then you can ask the question, should we have like high frequency data validation on the reported data? Which we see many people do. DNV, for instance, offers this through their Emission Connect. And we think it's worth the investment to have someone, a third party, saying that this is as close to the truth as possible when it comes to data. Then is to set up a robust governance structure in terms of how you want to deal with the EUAs to make sure that you are compliant. You need to have in place plans for, okay, how are we going to deal with this? Who's going to pay for it and all of that? This needs to be sort of planned for internally so that you are prepared for the regulations to come into force. And then it's all about sort of advising and discussing this with counterparts as well. Getting it into BIMCO clauses and all of that, which sort of takes me over to the more commercial side of this. it's important to discuss this with the counterparts. But I think going into these discussions, you need to have a view on how you want to deal with it. You don't want to come unprepared for these discussions, so you need to have a plan. And then, if you have a solid plan, I think you're also in a position to update your legal framework significantly. And the idea here, I think, is, as we showed on the previous slide, is that the cost should be sort of pushed down the value chain. And I know that's easier said than done, but I think at the end of the day, it should be the end consumer who picks up the bill. But I know it's easier said than done, for sure. Another thing which we see is important is to keep flexibility in terms of the structure you put in place. Because there are curveballs that's coming. For instance, we heard about the case where it's a big charter who said that, okay, we're going to settle this in US dollars. Yeah, the EUAs, they actually are, the cost is in euros, then you suddenly have a FX risk as well on top of it, and you also, of course, have the volatility and the price in the EUA. So you're going to see a lot of various solutions in the ETS space, especially towards sort of the first surrendering part. I don't think anyone knows how this will actually play out for the industry. But I think having taking an active approach to it and plan for it is going to be critical. Then it's also about understanding the EUA market. You saw the price volatility. It's different drivers in the EUA market than we are used to in shipping. So getting that under the skin is also going to be important. And also, of course, develop a procurement strategy in terms of the EUAs. But I think the simplest part is not to buy at the right time, but buying EUAs is the simplest part. I think all the other steps here is going to be the critical ones. So that's the challenges we foresee for ship owners currently. And then what we have done in Wilhelmsen, as I showed, we started looking at this in October 2021. And we made a couple of assumptions that it's going to be very important to have emissions reduction, basically. The focus on that is going to be very high from the ship owners. Data quality is going to be key. And something that we need to have in place, and also the fact that we saw that ETS was going to be a huge administrative burden. So then we decided to set up a performance management department where we have people who's basically looking at data to optimize the vessel's performance. And the approach here is that, or the thinking here is that we want to bridge data with actions. And you can have as many fancy dashboard as you want, but you also need to have people in place to discuss the data in the dashboards with the different stakeholders. That could be crew, it could be the ship owner itself, even charters, if that's possible. I think sort of the cooperation and the dialogue is critical here to get everyone on board in terms of what's going to happen. We also made a vessel performance software that we use to visualize data, and that's primarily noon data, but it's also capable of visualizing sensor data if ships have that in place. Then we established, here's the reason why I have the other logo. We have also established a company called Hecla Emissions Management, and this is a turnkey provider of EUTS services. It's a joint venture with Affinity Shipbroking, who's based out of London. And the idea is basically to help the clients that we have on technical management with complying with ETS. We saw that this is going to be challenging, especially if you're sitting outside of Europe. I think the European community it's easier to be based here because you know the systems, you have legal entities in the countries, you have bank accounts in Europe, etc. But not all companies have that in the shipping industry. So that's established to support them. And the idea is basically that we help them throughout, call it the entire journey, where you have ETS journey, where you have registry establishment, you create the accounts, you do data integration with them, carbon market advisory, you can buy EUAs from the company, but we actually advise people to have multiple sources of EUAs in the beginning, and that's because this is totally new to people, so it's probably easy to get taken for a ride, basically, if you can compare different prices. Registry management, this is, to me, the most underestimated element of ETS, where you actually have to have a structure in place in terms of, especially if you're in sort of the charter game, you have to have structures in place where you're able to send and collect EUAs in an efficient manner. And then at the end, it's the surrendering part. So this is the 2 points you see here is basically what we have done, of course also talking to the clients and getting them to understanding it. So one is on the data analytics, how the vessels are technically operated, and then the other is more on the administrative side, being prepared for ETS. As I said initially, it's a little bit premature to talk about future steps of optimal routing under EU ETS, but it's a very important part of it as well, because you suddenly have a 8 billion euro cost that you need to tackle, and not everyone can switch to alternative fuel vessels. Overnight, there are 70,000 sailing vessels out there today. So working actively with optimizing the performance of the vessel is going to be key. So what we see is going to be important in the future is, of course, weather routing, that you optimize the voyage based on the weather. You should utilize the natural forces that's out there, so that you can reduce the fuel consumption as much as possible. We think speed adjustment is key as well. Of course, this is sort of a balance between the commercial interests and the technical condition of the vessel and all of that, but also important. But I think having everyone talking about this and understanding the narrative that we're in is important. So having the ship charters also involved in this discussion is very important. Port call optimization, if that's possible. Efficient scheduling of port calls, reducing idling time in port. Maybe also on-time arrival, if that's possible. I think the ports themselves has to be brought onto the discussion here as well, and take an active part in this. And then lastly, it's sort of more technical performance management of the vessel. Trim optimization, ballast water optimization, and then sort of analytics on the fuel consumption itself. But I think, as a sort of ending comment, I think the most important element here is that the industry need to talk together. You need to involve the counterparts in the discussion, so that people are aware of what's coming, but also sort of knowledgeable enough to understand that we're in it together. And if we can reduce the fuel consumption, maybe by lengthening the voyage period or anything like that, it's actually to the benefit for all of us. So, yeah.
Question.
Yeah.
So there was a question already to Tanja. So it would be possible to change the route from Houston via Morocco to Europe. And what will rule? What do you think? Will the fuel prices rule, or will the emission prices rule? So the decision a ship manager, you have now to decide what is cheaper for you, shorter way or better port rotation. What do you think? What will be the future?
The fuel price is still higher than the cost of carbon. Cost of carbon is around $300 per ton of fuel. It's a conversion factor. In each ton of fuel, there's 3.114 tons of CO2. So I think still sort of fuel prices will be the deciding factor. But I also think, and we discussed this a little bit before the session, that you will be very on top of the ball to sort of cut out loopholes here. So if they see that you have sort of carbon leakage where people are trying to cheat the system, I think they will be very active on stopping that. So like back in 2012, the fuel price was very high, as an example, and then you saw vessels deviating to cheap ports to refuel. And then they offloaded maybe a barrel of lube oil or something like that, just to have it as a formal port call. I don't think that will be possible. Maybe in the beginning, but I think EU is on top of that actually going forward.
Do you foresee a shift in, let's say, in trade flows, for instance? Like
Yes, I do. Yes.
Far East inbound Europe, container offloading, not all the way in Hamburg, but maybe in Piraeus, and then ship it with a truck to Poland. Because if the consumer needs to pay it, the consumer still wants it to be cheap.
Yeah, I definitely think you're going to see a shift in trade flows, and I think also some will actively just avoid Europe to not have this as an issue, right? If you take the tanker operators as an example, they will try so you will definitely see a shift in this. And also we see positioning. I read an article back now that said that they've seen an or an increase in port calls in two African ports, and that the assumption is there that okay, this might be happening because you're sort of shifting the trade flows to avoid EU ETS down the road, basically. So you're going to see that, that's for sure. Yeah, sorry, it was.
The EU regulation, does it affect all European countries? So can Norway be a loophole?
No, Norway is actually, unfortunately, not. It's part of this economical cooperation. So Norway is included. I think Iceland is also included. UK is not. They have their own ETS. But I think again it's going to be difficult to sort of stop in Southampton to say that okay, we had a port call there unless it's actual port call. Yeah. What's the question here?
My question was connected to that one. So how is the port call under the EU ETS actually defined? Because otherwise, if I stop somewhere at a UK port, I just get alongside, wait for 1 hour, and continue my voyage.
I think it's what is it? Crew change, cargo. There are some. I don't know the actual definition of it, but it's clearly defined on the EU webpage. But I think they are very concerned about that happening, right? Because you're basically cheating a little bit the system. That's in place.
Optimizing.
Yeah, optimizing. Yeah, exactly. Any other questions? Yeah.
You were suggesting that the EU have no interest in the price exploding for the EUAs?
No. So that I didn't mean that.
I mean, how is the supply managed or regulated? Is there unlimited supply of EUAs?
There is a market stability reserve, and I don't think EU is interested in the carbon price going through the roof. Just to correct myself, I think they're interesting to having it at a certain level and then gradually increasing.
But then they have to manage the supply.
Yes, so they do that.
So
too.
how is it regulated today?
They have this.
Norway can sell unlimited number of EUAs?
No, it's the defined market, right? But they have the market stability reserve have backup if they need to supply more or even also take off.
Demand goes too high,
Yes,
the price goes up, they just provide more digital.
Yes, EUAs basically. Yeah, Bitcoin. Yeah.
You talked about high frequency data validation.
Yes.
How is that, you think, going to be decided going forward? Because I guess both charter and owner need to agree. Is there something in regulation around that, or is it just based on discussion between the parties?
As far as I know, it's not in the regulations, but I think it's in the owner's interest to have swift settlements of EUAs towards the charters. So let's say that you have a voyage that ends in March 2024. You don't want to wait all the way until the year is over and the emissions for that vessel is settled and verified. You want to settle it as soon as possible, and then having someone who comes in and say that, okay, we do the verification of that data. We are an independent third party. That I think is worthwhile the investment if you're active in the charter space. That I have to say. If you're a cruise line who own your own vessels, it really doesn't matter. Then it's more about sort of timing the market when you buy the EUAs, because you don't have to send the EUAs to someone or collect it from someone. But if you're in the space of chartering, then chartering in or out, then it's that I think is important. Yeah. Then I'll leave the floor. Sorry.
Can you only buy the EUAs from the European Union, or can you also like mine it like Bitcoin?
No, it's only it's through the over the counter. And it's a process here where you have large auctions, and that's to few like the big banks and all of that, and then it's sort of filtered down to over the counter. So you can buy it through banks, commodity traders, etc. Yeah.
And it's really based on the actual consumption of the individual vessel, and it's not based on like Eco-Transit, a general assumption of a specific cargo type or.
No, it's the actual consumption.
Actual consumption.
Yeah. Good. Then I'll leave the floor to someone else.
Right. Does anybody need a break, or can we carry on? I think it's still okay. Yeah. So now we would continue with the second part of our presentation, or package. We have to give credit to our colleague Florian, who did the hard work for us, because now we're going to have a look at a few case studies, and we want to see what voyage planning, automated voyage planning can do, and how it can help to avoid emission or reduce emission, and to reduce cost.
Yeah, right. So I'm Benjamin Martschin, and I work for Chartworld 7 Seas since 2019. And before that, I studied Nautical and maritime management in Bremen, and also served on different cargo ships. And now, what does it mean for the routing? And we, as my colleague Axel already mentioned, have two case studies where we will explain actually on some numbers, the costs, and also how is it affecting the routing and the companies. This is regarding the question which was raised. As you can see, there was a study from Ningby, from Technical University of Lyngby, where they created a route, and as we have already said, that it would be possible, maybe we have a route from Houston to Barcelona, maybe the vessels say, okay, we stop in Tanger Med to avoid all the costs for the whole passage. So that is not possible, because the European Commission said we will introduce a 300 nautical mile buffer around a port outside of the European Union. So it's not possible to visit the port just outside to save all the costs from the previous voyage. So it will just be ignored, and you have to still pay the whole passage to Basel or Algeciras in this case, from Houston or wherever your departure was. So for container ships actually. So there are still some other regulations for tankers or for other cargo ships, but for container ships, where it's of course quite common to have a hub port or something like this, this is the case. So the European Commission is quite aware of this problem and has solved it. starting with the actual presentation of mine. This is a case study where, the first scenario will be from a European port to another European port. And the second scenario will be from a non-European port to a European port. So the difference is, of course, that when you travel from a European port to another European port, you have to pay 100% of the voyage, as mentioned before. And when you travel from a non-European port to a European port, you only have to pay 50% of it. And of course, if you optimize your route so that you use less fuel and you save the energy for that, of course you will also reduce the cost of the emission and the money you have to pay for it. So this is the theory, and of course we will now have a look into the example, what it actually means and how the numbers will look like. So, for the routing, Chartworld and 7 Seas are having a route network, which means it's actually data or a data-driven routing engine where we are creating routes on a lot of data which is sourced from charts, from all different sources. I think later on I will coming deeper into that point. And our optimizer are also using the same data and the same route network. So we will create the route, and our optimizers, for example, weather optimization, will be on the same based data. So this is quite important and interesting to know because this is actually the backbone for the routing. And here's just a quick overview on the data we are using. For example, very important, the bathymetry. So we are creating routes which are safe in terms of water depth and all other factors which are related to the bathymetry. And for example, if you have a vessel with 10-meter draft and there's a shallow area with maybe 9-meter water depth, we will avoid to cross this area, and an alternative route will be created. And also, of course, very important are the charts. So all information which is inside the chart, like traffic separation schemes, navigational aids, offshore safety zones, everything is also considered inside the route network. And other sources are, of course, the sailing directions and nav area warnings, TMP notices, and also some local data from maybe the ports itself, from local authorities, which announce changes in their internal waters, in their territorial waters, which are not already maybe published in the sailing directions, because often it takes a bit time for the Admiralty to adapt these changes, and local authorities are a bit quicker. Okay, so based on that, we are creating the routes, and all the data is enriched and added and updated manually, not manually, but monthly. And there are also some quality standards in place, like if we have a restriction of, let's say, maximum speed limit of 10 knots, and there's also a minimum speed limit of 12 knots, that there will be a notification that there is something cannot be correct, like checking for plausibility in this case. So and for example, Axel and I, we are also checking this data and enriching the route network with this kind of data. Very important as well is the historical data analysis. So we are using AIS tracks, or historic AIS tracks, of course, from the past, to see actually where do the vessels really go, what are practical routes, where are the traffic flows, to also for crossing courses, okay, where should we lay down the legs? How can we create the best routes which follow the practice, but which follow also all the regulation and rules which are within the charts and sailing directions and these things. So this is one example with prices, for example, for low sulfur oil or very low sulfur fuel oil and marine gas oil. So in this, it was August 2023, we had a price of $685 for sulfur oil and marine gas oil of $991. And in January 2022, we had the same price for very low sulfur fuel oil and only $791 for marine gas oil. So marine gas oil has increased since then quite a bit. The CO2 price at the moment, or in August, was $88. As already said, the ETS certificates are traded in euros, so we just change it to dollars to make it a bit more easy to understand. And there you can see the diagram because it's quite related to the routing as well. Because if the price of the very low sulfur fuel oil and marine gas oil is very close together, another route might be better than if there's a big gap in between. Because if for example, if you have the emission control areas and you don't need to avoid them, you say, okay, we go through them because the price is not that much bigger. But if there's a big gap in between, you say, okay, we avoid these areas. We can use the cheaper fuel and we save the money.
Maybe you can just add, so for the purpose of this case studies, there was a price assumed of $88 for the CO2 price. And we can also say that the tanker, it's a real ship basically, that was used, it's in the database of NAPA because this is our solution partner. So all these calculations are based on a 180 meter long tanker. With the price of $88. And also Florian told me that he was using this very low sulfur for the calculation purposes because they have a similar viscosity and the consumption is nearly the same for the MGO and the very low sulfur oil. So it's based on the same consumption rate. So that's why he was choosing that type of fuel in order not to have these differences in the consumption. Yeah. Okay. So just for the purpose of this calculation and of these case studies.
Okay, let's have a look at our case. So from European port to European port, in this case from Rotterdam to Barcelona. The first scenario will be the shortest safe route, and the second scenario will be fuel optimization. So two different, or same route, but one is optimized and the other is not optimized. There you can see some figures. Of course, the speed is the same for both routes. The distance is different. So the shortest safe route is shorter with 1,962 nautical miles. Also, the distance out of the ECA zone is shorter. The distance within the ECA zone is the same with 410 nautical miles. And of course, also the fuel consumptions are different. And according to that, also CO2 emission is different. So just to give you a small overview what it means for the figures. And there you can see the two routes, but let's have a look a bit more closer. So this is the first scenario, just the shortest safe route. And the total length, as I already mentioned, 1,962 nautical miles. The distance within this route is 11% of the voyage. And the total fuel consumption is 136 metric tons. So that means we have a CO2 emission of 431 metric tons, which needs to be compensated later. The fuel costs for the voyage will be, as you can see, $208. And based on this number, the emission cost for 2024 will be $15,171, so 40% of the emission costs. In 2025, it will increase to 70%. These are the steps which are regulated. So that means $26,550. And in 2026, we have to compensate 100% of the costs. So keep this in mind. Now we've got scenario 2. The fuel optimized route, of course, if we consume less fuel, the CO2 emissions will also go down. But of course, also depending on the fuel which we are using, if marine gas oil or low sulfur oil. The total length has increased because we are avoiding certain areas like ECA zone and also, of course, going with the best current or avoid areas where we have wind against us. So it's a bit longer. The distance in the ECA zone has reduced about 1%. And that also means the fuel consumption has gone down about 3%. And also the emissions has gone down to about 3%, which results in the cost of $89,682, so 3% less than the shortest, safest route, which results, of course, also in lower emission costs for 24, 25, and 2026. So the total savings for this voyage with a weather-optimized route is 3%, which means in absolute figures $3,046 for this voyage. So of course in Europe it's not that big difference, as you will see in the next example, where we have a longer voyage over the Atlantic Ocean. But I think already you get an idea what it means in numbers. And so.
We have one question specific to this? Or?
Yeah, only the question is, so now the fuel consumption is lower because of optimized route based on weather or based on fuel changeovers or later fuel changeover, or where is the effect coming from? Only from weather optimization?
From weather optimization, yes.
All right, so it has nothing to do with MGO changeover from HLO to MGO or whatsoever?
Well, of course, depending on where you are, in which area you are sailing, but the key factor is the weather and to save the fuel because of currents and weather forecasts.
Okay.
So,
But less time in the ECA zone also means I'm burning cheaper fuel for a longer time. So that effect is in there, isn't it?
yes.
So it's not only weather optimization, it's also less time in ECA zone means using cheaper fuel.
Yeah.
Theoretically, yes, but in this specific scenario, as you can see, I think in the previous slides, the distance in the ECA zone is the same. So that's why it doesn't, in comparison between the two, in this scenario, there is not much of a...
Just the time? Because 10 and 11% is the difference.
Yeah, because the voyage shores.
It's the time in the ECA zone, not the distance.
No, it's the percentage of the voyage. That's why it has gone down. Okay. So because the other voyage was a bit longer, that's why. Yeah. But the distance is the same. That's
the distance in the ECA zone is the same, so that's why.
Fuel MGO should be the same, isn't it? Because fuel MGO reduced from 28 to 27. In the ECA zone, you have to burn MGO. But reduced it. That's why I was asking the question.
question.
Yeah. That was, so that, as I say, that's probably due to the weather optimization. You're using a favorable current, or you're not steaming against the wind or something like that. So there is some saving, but it's not really due to the fact that you're changing over earlier or later or something like that.
But the engine room might be, sorry.
But keep it in mind, we will have a look in the next scenario, and this is exactly where it comes in. Okay, sorry.
Good. I think, yeah, so a small summary. So, of course, the cost will increase in general because of the emission trading system. And here are some figures. In this case, how much it will increase for this voyage in 2024, about 15%. In 25, 26% with 70% of compensation, and with 100% it would be 37% of the costs. So I think it's quite considerable. Yeah. So yeah, compared to the absolute costs is of course not that much in this example, but yeah, something you need to consider, and what makes it important to create the most economic routes. Yeah, please.
I was just saying, I think for the comparison purposes, you assume same speed on both the voyages, because that makes sense for comparison.
Yeah, it was the same speed. Yeah. I think 15 knots for both. But of course, when you have the
fuel optimizing, of course, speed, you can also optimize on speed, which will result in more differences.
Sure.
So that's the element that is not there.
Yeah, but yeah, it would be very hard to compare it, then, as you said. But so that's why we have chosen the same speed.
There's no speed optimization.
Yeah, but of course, same speed doesn't mean the same engine load when you are running with the current or against it. Then will have a big effect on that. Okay. Okay, now the second case study, I will hand over to my colleague.
Okay. Right, so our second case study is a voyage starting in a non-EU port, and we are going to the EU. And as a reminder, now we are looking at 50% of that emission cost has to be compensated for. Initially, 40% of that 50%, then 70%, and finally 100% of that 50% in the end. And here we're going to have an additional scenario. The first scenario is again the shortest safe route, which will be serving as our basis for the comparison. The second scenario is basically a safe or shortest safe route, but we are trying to avoid the ECA zone as much as possible. There is a large ECA zone here in the United States, but there is none over here. The other one ends here. So there is a large ECA zone here in the USA. So we are trying to avoid that as much as we can, but other than that, we don't have any optimization. And finally, the third scenario is the fuel optimization, so the fuel optimized route. And also for the previous scenario, this kind of optimization we don't do in-house. We have partners for that. And for all these calculations, my colleague Florian, he was using the NAPA API basically, because NAPA, they are very good. They have all these ship models, digital twin we called it, I think, and they can do all these calculations with the fuel and the consumption, and they also have this weather optimization. So these are the three scenarios we're going to have a look at. And in our first scenario, this is, as we say, the shortest safe route. And these are the figures, 5,300 roughly. 19% of that voyage are inside of the ECA zone. And we are looking at fuel costs of almost $279,000. If we would go like that in 2024, we would have to pay emission costs of nearly 21,000, and if it was in 2026, it would be more than $52,000. So let's see what we can do with first of all just trying to minimize the time in the ECA zone, and as I said, the ECA zone is here. around the United States. This was the original shortest route, and you can see we are staying quite for a long time inside the ECA zone. And this blue route is the other route, the alternative, which is reducing that time and the distance here in the ECA zone. And that gives us a slightly longer route, as you can see, but the distance inside the ECA zone is quite reduced by 15%, and the fuel consumption, because the longer route is slightly higher, and the overall fuel cost, however, will be lower because you are burning that expensive oil for a lower or for a reduced amount of time, and that's why you actually finally come out with some cost savings here, just because of minimizing the time while you have to burn this expensive fuel. All right? Yeah, emission cost in a similar range as before, and at the moment, as I said, we are looking at a fuel cost saving of 4%, but on the other hand, we are looking at an increase, if we are looking at the 2026 scenario, of 1.6 compared to the previous scenario. And we touched on this before. This whole avoidance of the ECA zone is greatly dependent on the fuel price gap. So we have a look at this route here, which is now finally the fuel optimized one. And you can see it looks quite strange at the first glance, and that's due to the weather optimization. There must be some favorable currents or some low pressures that we are trying to avoid. That's why it looks a little bit different. I can say that this curve here is due to the ECA zone, so we are clearly avoiding the ECA zone here, as you can see. And we finally have, for the fuel optimized route, an increase in the total length again, 5%. And we have a distance in the ECA zone, which is, again, is reduced, but not as much as in the previous scenario. And this will then finally give us a fuel cost, a reduced fuel cost of 13%. So 13% compared to the original scenario, the shortest safe route. And that is now a combination of both. It's weather optimization and switching over the fuels. Okay, yeah, and the overall fuel cost, as I say, will be reduced by 13%. And also we will manage to reduce that emission cost. It's now at it's almost like 47,000. So in that scenario, we achieved both in a sense. But as I said, this whole avoidance of the ECA zone, which is kind of like a thing that we can play with, is greatly dependent on that fuel price gap. And remember, I think there was a few slides back, we had a look at two different fuel prices. At once in a while, maybe I can just go quickly back. I think it was here. In January 2022, the fuel price gap was not that big, as you can see. Okay, and if we were using these figures for our voyage calculation, so if you punch that in, the voyage cost, then we would get this purple route. And you can see, if the fuel price gap is not that big, it doesn't make sense to accept a longer route in order to avoid the ECA zone, of course. Yeah, if they are nearly the same, then a longer route will cost you more. Okay, so this avoidance of ECA zone is really greatly dependent on the fuel price gap. Yeah. Right. Finally, we have again a few figures here. So again, the 100% is basically our reference route, and the cost due to the emission trading, as you can see, are still quite a lot, especially when we go for this 100% in 2026. And also, as I said, the fuel price gap is making an impact on, does it make sense to avoid the ECA zone, yes or no? And luckily, all this is factored in, as you can see. So we were using this optimized fuel category in that scenario. And this is, as I say, a mixture of both. And luckily, it's being considered. So the system is smart enough to see if the fuel price gap is not very high, it doesn't make sense to avoid this ECA zone at all cost, at the cost of a longer route, in other words. Okay, and yeah, what it comes down to, I think what we can all agree is this whole CCI and this emission trading system, everything has become so complex that I think you actually need sophisticated software in the future to sort these things out and to be able to reduce cost and to be efficient and to be competitive. So I think that's what it comes down to, because it has become so complex. All right. Okay. Yeah, these are the resources. I think we can share this presentation. I think Florian should not object to this. So if there's anybody, we can share this presentation as well. Right. Any specific questions to these case studies? No? Would you like to have a small break right now, or shall we continue? Like a small coffee break? Would it be appreciated? Okay. And then we carry on in maybe 5 to 10 minutes, something like that. And then we have our last presenter.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good morning to everybody. My name is Christian Meyer. I'm from BBC Chartering. I guess I have to squeeze it a little bit. The last one always have to kick it in. Yeah, I will do it from the charterer's point of view. So we heard a lot of stuff technical-wise, how we should do it, and I will try to bring it a little bit in the perspective, so what we can do. So first of all, this EU ETS is just one module within the fit of 55. So everybody who thinks this is complicated, we will get more complicated things in the next year with EU fuel, maritime, and all this stuff. So this is just a startup. This has already been discussed a lot of times. 100% we have to consider intra-EU and 50% all voyages which are in or out. And this is a nice figure I found on the EU webpage. So they consider 144 million tons of CO2, which is 3 to 4% of the whole emissions in Europe. So we are quite the lower part, but we have to also to make our effort to reduce it. This has not been shown yet. These are the conversion factors that we find. So we're talking about diesel oil, gas oil. This is the MGO, MDO, whatever you call it. This will be with a 3.206. And you will find from the DMX to DMB. So these are the viscosity. So they are driven by the viscosity, these fuels. The next one is very nice. We are talking about very low sulfur fuels since 2020. And the EU talks now about light fuel and heavy fuel. But if we have a look at the ESO table, the light fuel is from an RMA, so which is a viscosity of 10 up to D, which is an 80, viscosity of 80. And then all from an RME 180 upwards is the heavy fuel. The difference is not that big. Anyhow, when we are calculating from next year onwards these emissions, we have to see what kind of viscosity is on board. Yeah? Usually you're ordering a 380, but maybe you get a 60 viscosity or a 120, so it depends on your emissions as well. Yeah, I just made some small comparison. So 140 million is about 45 million of tons fuel, what we are talking about in the EU, or what they are considering. And the price, of course, is fluctuating. I took 85. I guess another one in the morning took 84. So So when we take my calculation, we're talking about 12.2 billion, which has to be distributed somehow. So it's a big effort what we have to talk about. And then I started with our vessels from BBC. We have small vessels, 120 meters. They're consuming approximately 20 tons a day. So if I'm then taking an intra-Europe voyage with a 3.206, so we talk about 64 certificates per day, what we have to buy. So with 85, 5,450 euros per day. What we have to consider from a charterer's point of view into the profit and loss calculation every day. So if we are coming maybe to worse markets and we're talking about small profit and loss of $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 a day, it makes a big impact if you forget about to make it clear to your clients or you put it in your calculations or something like this. We are not a container carrier, but there are big vessels outside who can easily burn 200 tons, so I just scaled it up, 20 tons, 200 tons, factor 10. So we're talking already about 54,000 a day. What you have to consider additionally in your freight costs. Yeah. The bunker price, this was what I took the last week. It fluctuated a little bit between 900 and 1,000 within the EU ports. Of course, sometimes you get a little bit cheaper. In other ports outside the EU, you get it a little bit more expensive, but this is the average. The price will rise by 25 to 28% with these certificates. So what you have to consider, the price increase when you are calculating your rates. And then I summed it up a little bit just to gain a little bit awareness. We checked our data, and we have to consider about 100,000 metric tons of fuel with these voyages into the EU and intra-EU. So which is for us 130 small vessels. We're talking about 27 million. What we have to consider within 1 year, so we have to earn somehow more. And if you scale it up again, I took then Maersk, so it's a 200-ton consumption a day, and they have 5 times more vessels than us, so it's a factor 50. We're talking about 1.35 billion. So it means for every charterer who is operating under the scheme should really think about what he's doing and how he's doing. So and this is how we started thinking about the problem. The regulation is clear, but the question is, who will buy the certificates? The owner, the charterer, the shipper. What is if the owner is buying these one? Does the owner take care for the price? I'm not sure. I don't think so. He will just buy it. So what kind of price I put in my rate when I'm calculating rates? If I buy it, how I bring it as a charterer, how I calculate it into the rate with the actual one, or I buy on bulk, or I buy these certificates on the spot when I'm buying the bunker. So there are different scenarios. Or maybe there are also some clients who say, hey, nice that you have to buy certificates, but I don't want to have this in the rates. I will give you the certificate. Tell me at the end of the voyage how many tons you consumed, I will give you the certificate. So all these scenarios are somehow possible. The next thing is then how to calculate rates. Of course, even nowadays, we have to consider bunker. Bunker is also fluctuating a little bit. If I have a project in 3, 4, 5 months, I don't know what is the price. I know that container carriers often work with buff clauses. So if the bunker price is rising or lowering, so they will adjust the rates. We're also doing this, but the question is if we can also implement such a stuff for the EU certificates. Or our clients want to have a lump sum rate. So if they're asking for a lump sum rate, we have to give it. So how you calculate it, how you play with it, when you buy it, there's a point. Yeah? When I'm fixing the contract, or when I'm buying the bunkers, or I'm waiting for a better price. So there's a lot of stuff to think about and a lot of speculation, in my opinion, included in this new regulation.
And then how to buy. Oyvind told already, you have to have an account. I mean, the owner or the DPA, the ISM holder, the dock holder, has to have an account anyway because he has to receive it. But does the owner has one? Or you just say, no, transfer it directly into the DOC account? Do I have something as a charterer? Or I say, no, I will just pay you in cash. Yeah? So you buy it, I pay you in cash. Or maybe clients coming and telling, okay, I will give you the certificates. If I don't have an account as a charterer, how shall I receive these certificates? So these are the practical problems you have, and you have to consider, and you have to go in contact with your clients, what they want, what you want. At the end, somehow it has to be at the owner. This is simple. But the chain before, there are a lot of solutions. Accounting. We have the problem that everything is based on the MRV data. So this is on the, I saw in your presentation the 31st of April you have to submit it. I thought it was the 30th of April. Anyhow, next year you have to submit the data what you have consumed over the year before. So 3 months later, next year. You submit the data, then they verify it, and then up to September, you have to make the submission for the EU ETS certificate, which is more than 1.5 years later when I consumed the fuel. It's a lot of time in between. And I guess no client will accept after 1.5 years, guys, we have there a few hundred certificates missing, you have to pay it. Usually everybody has closed his books at the end of the year. Nobody can come 6-7 months later. And yeah, this is the point. How you account it. You will make it on a monthly basis, on a yearly basis. You will settle that with your owner or with the dock holder. There are a lot of questions. And of course, I guess a lot of solutions. And there is no correct solution for everybody. So this will depend on charter parties. How to calculate off-hires, if we have claims. If there's a crane breakdown and you don't consider this, that the vessel is 3, 4, 5 days off-hire, consumes bunkers in port. Or let's say, has an engine problem, sails to a port of refugee to repair the engine. Think about that, or the owner has, in this case, to think about to maybe buy certificates, or you have to make hire statements, how to offset all this stuff. So it's a lot of administrative work, which looks like very easy from the technical point of view and from the regulation, but if it comes to practice, it is a lot of stuff. Speed consumption claims. If the vessel is one knot less, and often over a voyage of 20 days, maybe I need 1 day longer. Who is paying for this? The charterer or the owner? Or if I have a consumption claim, so I consume 1 or 2 tons more, where are the limits? When I see these discrepancies. If I have a long-term charter, might be not the big problem, so I can settle at the end of the year. If I have just short-term charters, just for a trip or 1 or 2 trips, so the vessel is going in and out, it might be even more problematic because you want to settle. Yeah? Nobody accepts 3, 4, 5 months later. Oh yeah, see, we have to talk about 3, 4, 5 tons or something like this. Nobody will accept this. So you have to find clauses which will give you the right and settle everything in time, on time, and not discuss 1.5 years later. Will trade lanes change? Is the next thing. So if you're sailing from US via Med to Persian Gulf, sometimes you took cargo in Italy or in Turkey or in Greece. Does it make sense? Because if you do this, you have to pay the first leg from US to Europe, half of the certificates, and then from EU to Persian Gulf as well, half of the certificates. And does the client, let's say, who will load in Italy or in Greece additional cargo, will pay for this? So the rate will go up like hell. Because the other clients who are sailing from US to Persian Gulf, they said, for what? For what I shall contribute into EU emission system. I want to go from there to there and then not into the EU. The next point is maybe these ports where you say, okay, we make some additional port call in Africa, which is possible for tankers and small dry bulk vessels, except the containers. But if we have also CII as a global regulation on that, small voyages will be very problematic for your CII. So the questions even you think about, or a charterer thinks about, to discharge this stuff there, and then you make a short trade. Who will do this? Is there anybody who will do this under the aspect of CII? It's the next question what you have to consider. So even we have good ideas, you also need others who will take up these cargoes and try to take it, or you convince your clients to go from Europe to North Africa or somewhere else. We will see what will happen. There are a lot of scenarios possible, but if really trade lanes change, this is the question. And we also made some calculation with respect to biofuels. Oh, this is coming now. Yeah, biofuels versus EU ETS certificates. So if you're selling on biofuels, it might save you EU ETS certificates. If you have a biofuel of 30%, you pay 30% less. But as long as the price is not high enough, or not the right one, or the fuel price is not the right one, it might make no sense. So it makes even more sense to say, okay, I will burn these the dirty shit, and I pay the certificate. If the price goes up, then you may have to think about, okay, maybe I'm buying biofuels. Then is the question where I will get biofuels. Do I get it all over around the world? If I have a vessel which I'm bunkering with biofuels in the US because I want to go into the EU to avoid these EU ETS certificates, and then the chartering department says, no. First you make a voyage down to South America, and then we will see where you're going. Due to my tank capacity, maybe I have to use these biofuels. So then I pay there more for the biofuels, and later on when I go into the EU, I have to buy again either biofuels or I have to buy certificates. So these all scenarios, what you have to think about when you are trying to plan your vessels around the world, and especially these voyages into the EU and out of the EU. Out is not a problem, I'm bunker in Europe, but everything what is going in, the fuel might be also tricky, and you have to think about what you want to do and how you want to plan it. If the vessel is able to do it, to have at the end maybe 3 different fuels on board. So on the last one is a little bit, are all players around the world are aware of this? Are Asian guys aware that they have to pay for this when I'm making rates? Are US guys or South American guys, when they have cargoes to the EU, are they aware when they're getting the rates? So, why it now picks up 28% from last year or something like this. Yeah, these are all the factors, let's say, where we went through and tried to find answers. As I said, there is no really correct answer. You have to find the right answer for your specific business as a charterer. But at the end, you have to think about. If you don't think about, you will pay for it. And this costs a lot of money. There is the BIMCO EU ETS clause in place already. So of course it can be used, but I guess there will be a lot of amendments to it when somebody will use it, because not every charterer or every owner will accept exactly this formulation. And the first funny thing is, of course, owners and charterers shall cooperate and exchange all relevant data. I guess this works already now very good, because everybody wants to cheat the other. Yeah. So I want, if the owner has an engine failure and he can do it in 2-3 hours, he wants to avoid that the charterer knows it. Yeah? If the charterer can switch a voyage 1-2 days before, they will do it. Yeah? Because it's a profit thing, and the owner has a problem with it. He planned everything maybe for deliveries, for spare parts, and then 2-3 days before, oh no, we go to the other port. Sorry, my friend. This will happen. And with this in mind, we have a big problem. We might get a big problem here with such a sentence, data exchange. Because there is a lot of money involved. So verification by the independent verifier, this is simple. This is the owner's task or the DOC holder's tasks. They have to do it. This is not a big issue. And also for the charterers, they shall provide and pay for the allowance. This is also not a big thing. Again, the charterer has to think about how he get the certificates to the DOC holder. By cash, buying his own, directly from the clients or something like this. This is the tricky part. This is a suggestion from the BIMCO, so that they settle it monthly. But voyages maybe not end monthly. So even you say, okay, I will settle every time on the 1st of January, 1st of February. Yeah, but the voyages are ongoing over these times. Does it make sense to make it monthly? Does it sense to make it yearly? Yeah. We had a big discussion with the DNV because they're also providing a system that they're making these verification even on a daily basis. And then I was asking them, okay, guys, then we can quit with these MRV. I said, no, this is not possible. So that means I have a verifier for a daily verifying of the data to be almost sure that they are correct. And at the end of the year, the DOC holder has to make the verification again to have it for his documentation. So this cannot be combined, at least not from the present state. Yeah, transferring, this is also clear, has to be transferred. Therefore, everybody needs such an account. Otherwise, it is not possible to transfer these. And as Oyvind said, it takes in some countries half a year. We have only 3 months if you want to transfer on a monthly basis. So off-hire can be offset by charterers. Yeah, this is also nice sentence. In practical, it's again the question how we account it, how we do it, how we manage it, and if everybody accepts this. And then owners can suspend the performance in case of emission allowances are not paid or not transferred. This is a little bit like a lien on the cargo. So this is also here. So if the charterer is not paying or not providing the certificates according to the charter party, to the clauses, then of course I can say, okay, my friend, I will now wait here, and then until you paid or until you give me the EU certificates, and then we continue with our voyage. So also they have a small lien on that stuff. Yeah, this was the quick run through our thoughts as a charterer. Yeah, if you have questions.
Just a quick one. Do you foresee that the cargo owners will go out and buy UAs and then transfer it to charters?
Not the typical freight forwarder, I guess. But maybe if you have a big client like BP or like Shell or I don't know, these big oil majors, maybe you have these new energies, Vestas, maybe they have to buy anyhow some. And they said, hey, I have not such a nice price. I bought them already 2 or 3 years ago. I don't want to pay these 85 or these 120 euros per certificate. I have much cheaper ones. Might be. I don't know yet. We will see then when we start with the rates, I guess.
You talked about biofuels versus EU ETS on pricing. Would you consider biofuels at all without the emission trading system? Are biofuels interesting in general?
With this price, not. With this price, biofuels are much more expensive than just considering the certificates. But if the certificates going up to 120, 130, maybe biofuels coming down, this is the next point when EU maritime is coming into force. We are talking about another step of decarbonization. And then you are not able to sail with gas oil, the whole voyage on gas oil. You are not able to do this without penalties. So and then, of course, you need maybe 1 or 2 voyages with biofuels to reduce the values. And then, of course, it's interesting. And then maybe you have more biofuels, and then the biofuel price will drop. So it's always some, you have to see.
For the end customer, it doesn't really matter what's the price on biofuel, because that's 47% of all the large major corporations have signed the science-based targets. And there it's avoid, reduce, and only then offset. And even offsetting is not considered to be part of it. So as soon as a Unilever, as soon as an Aldi has signed the science-based targets, also in their supply chain, they need to reduce and avoid. And then biofuel is currently the only option. And this is why large companies like whatever, Schenker, DHL, Kuehne+Nagel, are actively selling biofuel with a mass balance concept to their customers. Yeah. And for them, it's about brand reputation, it's about making more revenue on their products, yeah? And like Patagonia or all those environmentally friendly products. So for them, they don't care if biofuel is more expensive. They just buy it because they can sell more stuff.
They do. I'm trying since 2 years. I'm trying to find a partner on the freight forwarding or on the client side to sail with other biofuels that we can make tests on our engines and storing capacities and how is the behavior of the fuel. I have not found yet one. To say, hey guys, we want to do this. We have clients who ask for a specific GHG emission rate of the vessel. We said, oh, we have now in this region only this bad one, but I can offer you, we buy biofuels on the vessel and then we open the range. They ask for the price, I give them the price. No, that's something. We take the bad one, it's okay. At the end, it's always price. And this is the funny thing. Everybody, when you're talking to anybody, it's always, we are green. And I was wondering about the cases here a little bit that not everybody is thinking at the moment about weather optimization, because even without the certificates, I can save on fuel. So everybody should use already weather optimization. And on the other hand, I can also say, I'm green because I'm doing weather optimization, so I'm reducing my fuel consumption and therefore my CO2 emission. And this is there the same. The campaigns are there. If you're coming there and you're asking them for price, the price is ruling the stuff. Maybe in the big markets, the containers might be a little bit different, but it's funny.
The interesting thing is, Kuehne+Nagel did a big investment into biofuel, HVO, and sustainable aviation fuel. And everybody was like, oh no, customers will not buy, it's all about the price. And within 3 months, it was sold out. Yeah, so there is a huge market. It's just taking a little bit longer for some customers and some areas. But let's say in the consumer industry and in the automotive industry, it's very, very strong.
And as I said, we will need it from 2025 onwards anyway, because of these EU maritime fuels. So we need more biofuels. Otherwise, we cannot comply with the regulations. It's not possible. Yeah. Somebody else?
Do you think that the charterers will enforce tools to improve the data quality to avoid such story of there was some breakdown of engine and so on, and the owner will just hide this knowledge? So technically the charterer could let's say push the owner in that direction, or is the owner strong enough to fight against this? Let's say, big brother wishes of the charterer?
I guess this depends on the power of the charterer. When I hear it from Breeze, from our vessels which are on the container market, the container guys, they are very strong, so they implement everything or almost everything what they want. With us, it's a little bit more difficult in the dry bulk, in the break bulk market, and you have a lot of AIS data, so you can see, of course, when a vessel is not moving or only with 3 or 4 knots. You can ask why, but you have to find it. This is the point. And with data, more data, at the end, the owner is responsible for the MRV. This is the thing. And the owner has his reporting system. Of course, I can, as a charterer, come and say, okay, you have to report this again, and you have to do my system. But the question is, at the end, if you don't have sensors on board, somebody has to put the figures inside. And the question is, if you have 3-4 systems where a captain has to enter figures, do you really think that we get a more accurate reporting? Because he will just do something inside. Yeah? This is.
That's the point. That will be the future then, to avoid this.
But it depends so much on the market. So, as Christian said, for containers, the major carriers, they are in a position to say, hey guys, we want this system, as they have the same position with even shipyard operations, where they say, okay, you use this specific paint, otherwise you're out of the game. On certain other types of vessels, there's a different situation. Then there's maybe not the chance for the charterer to say, hey, we want to have this system. But it's a normal market thing. There's no way to say, hey guys, now with the EU ETS system, we need to have this and this. It's the same with the biofuels. Biofuels is a pure CII-driven thing. As the CII for some vessels is critical and only achievable with biofuels, and saying will come with other regulation which are coming into force in the future. As Christian said, ETS is only one part of it, and actually one of the easier things to comply with. And even the charterers, they are very much easy on this topic because they say it's a pure money thing. I don't want to.
If we are honest, this is just a commercial thing. This is
very, very
and you have to think about it.
Thing. The operational tasks like CII, fuel EU maritime, and all what is coming up for, they are way more challenging to ship owners than the ETS thing.
Thank you. But I think also this control question is quite interesting because right now, for example, we have in our house with my team kind of fleet operation center. It was built up for another purpose, but right now we are checking also exactly like the use of scrubbers, emissions, fuel oils, and controlling the ships. First of all, to be compliant, but on the other hand, it's also the interest of the company to saving also money, and you can save quite a lot of money. So I think maybe this is also maybe in the system. Right now we have really at least 2 nautical officers or captains sitting every hour in the office, 24 hours per year. But I think maybe then in the future we have a kind of digital system getting an automatic email to the charterer, to the ship, like reallocating or asking why they're not using it, or for the speed or the fuel oil, just to reconsider. Because I think from one side it's the interest of compliance, and on the other side it's a commercial thing to save money. And the companies are interested also in the control system. So I think this is also maybe something to consider in the future.
The control system.
Yeah.
Of course. But again, that's why, I mean, usually every charterer is controlling his vessels. If you're not controlling your vessels, then you're not doing a good due diligence. Then you have a problem because you're losing money. The more you are controlling the vessels, the more you can save on this side. But on the other hand, then we're coming back to this, does ECDIS can optimize routes? And then I said no, because we will take more and more the responsibility from the vessels to the shore, and we will control the vessels from shore, definitely. And the more regulations we get, the more we will take, because we have the same. When I was sailing, I had no idea about all these regulations, and you get your fuel, you burn it, you make it safe on the voyage, and that's all. So once you are ashore, you are confronted with all this stuff, and then you have to think about it. And this is nothing where the seafarers or the captains can think about. They have no ideas about charter rates, bunker prices, and all this stuff. It will be ruled and controlled by shore. This will be more and more. Any other question? 12 o'clock.